Welcome back to another live Patriots Q A. Evan, happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Here we go.
Always a good day of the week. Well, we're going to start with a question we got over on Twitter, but as always, drop your Patriots-related questions in our live chat. We'll get to as many as possible here for you live on air.
Welcome back to another live Patriots Q A.
You know, I thought we were past the technical difficulties. It's like our 10th one of these, but never a dull moment. All right, back to the question that we got on Twitter. Leon, in my opinion, the major glaring hole I see on this team is the defensive line. Why didn't Bill Belichick put more emphasis on signing a free agent and drafting a defensive tackle or a big defensive end?
That's a good question. And it's kind of the area of this defense that I sort of see as the biggest weakness as well, is the big bodies up front being able to hold up against the run. I think the main reason why they don't have insane depth at that position is because they are going to stick to more of a 3-4 base. Really, the Patriots, for most of the part last year, had only 2 or 3 down defensive linemen, hand in the dirt defensive linemen on the field at once. So to have, a big depth chart there at that position when you're really only going to play 2 or 3 of those guys at a time really doesn't make much sense from a roster construction standpoint. But the question is Lawrence Guy, Bo Allen, and hopefully Adam Butler, who was emerging a little bit last year as a run defender, enough on those base personnel package downs, first down, 1st and 10, when the team comes out with a fullback in the backfield, just like New England does, do they have enough big bodies, enough girth to kind of hold up against the run? That will be the question for them. But I understand in a 3-4 scheme why they're really more worried about building linebacker depth than they are building defensive line depth.
Absolutely. Moving into the live chat now, Brady asking, what cornerbacks do you think will make the roster, and what role do you see Juwan Williams having, since there's a lot of them?
Yeah, that's a good question about, both things are good questions. I think Stephon Gilmore, obviously, Jonathan Jones, JC Jackson, Jason McCourty, and Juwan Williams are all pretty safe. That's 5 right there. You're not going to cut a 2nd-round pick in year 2, most likely. So I think Williams, barring disaster, is going to be fine and is going to be on this team. So really what it comes down to is how many extra bodies at that spot are they going to take? Is D'Angelo Ross, for example, does he have a chance to make this team after a strong camp last year, or Lindsey Pipkins, who they signed in the offseason right after the season ended? Are those 2 guys, do they have enough of a fight in there to get into this battle? Or is it really going to be those 5 guys as the foundation with the safeties depth there as well? They have guys like a Patrick Chung, like an Adrian Phillips, maybe like a Kyle Duggar, who are safeties by trade, but they're also sort of slot corners, cornerback man coverage type of guys. So they have kind of, guys that can play inside out of that safety group as well. So they have insane depth in the secondary. I would say about 10 or 11 bodies end up making it between the 2 positions.
And of course, our weekly, bi-weekly tight end question: who are the starting tight ends?
Well, I think that the Patriots will be a heavy 12 personnel team, a heavy 2 tight end team at times this year, with Ossie and Keen both on the field at the same time, because they can do different things, because they have a little bit of different versatility. That Ossie can play that traditional Y in the inline tight end with his hand in the dirt, or flex in like the slot at times as well, whereas Keen's going to be more that H-back, kind of off the line type of guy, move tight end, and they have those 2 together to kind of make a nice kind of duo. So I think they'll both see a ton of snaps as rookies, and I don't think there's any reason to hold them back necessarily. So it'll be fun to see exactly how the Patriots use both those guys.
And we did get some new news this morning from ESPN's Mike Reese. Sony Michel underwent foot surgery last month. It was noted as maintenance-based to relieve some discomfort that Sony was feeling. So we have a question here in the live chat. Who do you think will be the number 1 running back if Sony starts on PUP?
Well, the Patriots are always one of those teams that do it by committee. Even with Sony Michel there, they still gave carries to Rex Burkhead. They still gave some carries to James White. Brandon Bolden every once in a while gets in the backfield and gets some action. So they're always keeping guys fresh. They're always taking guys out of the game and putting other guys in to keep those running backs fresh, because they know what it's like to run between the tackles and how the wear and tear that can really be on the body for a guy that's going to touch the ball 250, 300 times. So I think the big thing is with, who will be RB1. I'm sure it will be a committee regardless of Sony's health. So maybe a guy like a Rex Burkhead or Damian Harris, obviously, who we get a question about every other day as well. One of those 2 guys will see a little bit of an uptick in production, uptick in touches.
Leon asking if Jarrett Stidham plays well this year and ends up being the Patriots quarterback of the future, what will be their top draft need for next year?
Ooh, well, I think it depends. I think that it depends on where the offensive line goes this year and what we see out of Isaiah Wynn and Marcus Cannon. Now, if they're at the tackle position and they're looking for a new left tackle because maybe Isaiah Wynn gets hurt again or really isn't able to stay on the field or isn't able to play well or whatever the case may be, they could be looking quickly here for another left tackle because Wynn is already entering year 3. He's only got 4 guaranteed years on his contract as a rookie on his rookie deal. And you're probably not going to pick up the 5th-year option, an expensive 5th-year option for a tackle for a player that isn't staying on the field and has durability concerns. So I would say the biggest one will probably be the tackle position, maybe getting either bookend tackles, left and right tackle, and also that those defensive linemen. It would be nice to get kind of a 3-down defensive end who can play on all 3 downs and all types of phases and kind of against the pass and against the run, a Trey Flowers, Richard Seymour, that type of guy, Chandler Jones. It'd be nice to get another one of those guys in here as well.
Absolutely. And another question is about Jamar Smith and whether or not he's going to be the Patriots' next undrafted gem.
Well, I really like Jamar Smith. We've talked a lot about him in other videos, and I've written about him. He's got all the physical talent in the world to be an NFL quarterback. He's got good arm strength. He's got good mobility. He can move in the pocket really, really well. He's got decent anticipation and ability to read coverages for the most part. So I like his talent, and I think that he can really play. I mean, he made some throws in his tape that were draftable, great types of plays, getting outside the pocket, throwing across his body, throwing 40 yards down the field on the move, things that we saw kind of, Jordan Love do, for example, who goes in the first round, and Jamar Smith goes undrafted because of reasons that I'm still trying to figure out. 2-game suspension last year, maybe going to a smaller school at La Tech, maybe that was it. But at the end of the day, he's got all the talent in the world. He probably should have gotten drafted. His height, his school, his suspension, I think all those things kind of created a perfect storm that led to him going as a UDFA to the Pats.
And we did just mention Sony Michel's foot surgery that he underwent last month. The question is about whether or not he's going to be healthy for this season. I think the question is more whether or not he's going to be ready for training camp, which indicates to me that come the regular season, maybe a game or two, but he should be ready to go for the most of it.
I think so, but the biggest thing with Michelle was that they actually thought that the injury was going to heal itself over the off season just with rest and with rehab and icing and stuff like that. And when we get to May and the injury is still nagging him a little bit and he still doesn't feel great, that's when he goes under the knife. So that's why the delay of going under the knife for a procedure like this. It's not like he tore his ACL or something like that and it was a guarantee like we needed to give him surgery, right? They thought that this kind of little stress fracture or something like that on his foot could heal on its own, and it didn't. So that's why he ends up under the knife here. I think the biggest thing for Sony though is going to be ramping up in training camp and being able to get on the field in camp, because we've seen time and time again with the Patriots that if you don't get on the field in camp, a lot of the time they will use that PUP list to start you at the year on PUP and let you kind of ease into it that way instead, so that you're not just kind of thrown into it week 1 and without any lead up, without any practice time. So we'll see what happens in camp. If he is, at some point gets on the field this summer, then I think we can kind of say all things will be fine.
It is interesting because Michel's, all his previous ailments had to do with his knee. He's only missed 3 games in his first 2 seasons with the Patriots, but he's had that knee drained, scoped. So this is definitely a different situation. We'll see what happens there. But a new question from our live chat: outside of the obvious starters on the offensive line, who makes the roster for depth and who gets cut?
So another good question. I mean, listen, the draft picks in the last couple of years, I think Yadni Kajust and Yelda Froholt at the top of that list. Both of those guys, I think, will make the team or will be IR'd again or pupped again or something like that to save them a roster spot. But both those guys are going to be around. I think then the question is can the rookies from this draft class at the end of the day 3 there, the 6th and 7th round picks, can they jump Jermaine Illuminor and Corey Cunningham and make those veterans expendable? And could they go with a Michael Onwenu as their top, or actually their second guy, I guess, behind Froholt on the interior backup? Or could they go with the Justin Herron there? Or could they get Dustin Woodard as the backup center onto the roster in some way instead of risking him as a, practice squad guy. So I think the biggest question is where are Illuminor and where are Cunningham and their progression, their development, and can these rookies from this past draft jump them on the depth chart during training camp? My guess is that they end up hanging on to Illuminor because they gave him that tender. They seem to really like him in terms of his skill set. They gave up a decent amount to get him from Baltimore last year. So I think Illuminor will be the top backup on the interior as long as he can get into shape and get his conditioning up. And then we'll see from there how it kind of shakes out.
Leon asking, we know that Bill Belichick makes trades just before the season starts. Who do you see being traded and for what position?
Well, that's a good question. I think that we have to kind of wait to see who exactly will be on the block until things start to shake out this summer in training camp, especially without mini camp. We really don't know where the roster battles are across the league for the most part. So some guys that could be, on the outside looking in, we'll kind of know more about that in August. Again, I think that if you're looking at spots for Belichick to kind of go out and get a player right before the start of the season, like he usually does in some capacity, I'm still looking at the defensive line. I think that that's going to be the spot where they would really like to add another body, especially if they don't get what they want out of some of the guys that they currently have on the team, like a Dietrich Wise or like a Byron Cowart. If those guys don't take a step up, then I could really see them going out there and using draft capital to get a defensive lineman.
Nathan saying that Patriots Global compared Damari Byrd to a future Brandon Cooks. Can he be a starting wide receiver for the Patriots?
Damari Byrd is an interesting one because I've heard Brandon Cooks, you hear Philip Dorsett comparisons, he's got that kind of speed for sure. But I think that he's a little bit more fluid than both of those guys and has a little bit better change of direction skills and better with the ball in space after the catch. Cooks is a really great route runner for what he does, but he's also kind of a stiff guy and a pretty linear athlete. We're talking about goes and deep overs and posts and stuff like that from Brandon Cooks and not a ton of kind of jitterbug type moves. I think Damari Byrd can offer a little bit more of that, but maybe not as prolific as a downfield receiver as a Brandon Cooks. So I think he's a kind of a different type of animal than those two guys were. So it's going to be really fun for me to see how they find ways to get the ball in his hands, because last year I think the biggest thing about that offense was speed, right? That was what everybody was talking about. They didn't have enough speed at the skill positions. Well, this guy ran a 4.26, so that's some pretty damn good speed. So the question is just how do you get the ball in his hands and how do you get him into opportunities to create with the ball in his hands? And I think that that's really where Josh McDaniels has to start thinking things up.
Another question about the preseason. We did get a note about when training camp starts, a start date, a date to circle on your calendar for Patriots fans. Jose Martinez wants to know, how do you think a shorter preseason will affect the Patriots compared with other teams?
Well, I think it will affect the Patriots a pretty good deal because they do have a young quarterback starting games for them in his second year. So you look at years past and you would say, oh, the Patriots are going to win the Super Bowl. This is an easy thing for them. They still have Tom Brady. They still have all these veterans on the roster. They don't really need to learn anything, so it will be fine. But now you look at this team and you see a lot of young players that are expected to play major roles. And that is a little bit concerning that if they do cut down, especially training camp, the preseason games, I can live with not having those. And quite frankly, I think it's better for the entire league to cut down on travel. So I wouldn't be surprised because of the coronavirus if we end up playing only one or two preseason games to cut down on the travel between all these teams, because that's really where it can get dangerous, is when you start flying and when you start going into opposing teams' locker rooms and you start bringing outside people inside the bubble and things like that. That's when it can get worrisome. So the league right now is trying to play it cool and just act like the coronavirus is sort of not going to affect them come the fall. But I think that we might start hearing over the next couple of weeks, if things don't drastically change with the coronavirus, that the league is starting to explore, Disney World type things like the NBA is doing, or NHL host cities like the hockey is doing, because they're not going to be able to have the Patriots go and travel to their 8 road games and every other team go and travel to their 8 road games safely with the way that things are kind of going right now.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the NFL is going to need to make some adjustments. They have planned a little bit for the coronavirus to potentially hinder the regular season with having teams having similar bye weeks and stuff like that to then push into week 17 or 18, created week 18, but we'll see how that all shakes out. We have questions here about the undrafted wide receivers and if any of them can make an impact.
Well, everybody's going to love Jeff Thomas. That's going to be the number one thing that we're all going to hear about is Jeff Thomas, Jeff Thomas, Jeff Thomas. I think that the other guy that has the potential to possibly do something is certainly Will Hastings. But the concern I have with Hastings is that he really didn't play on special teams at Auburn, and he's going to have to develop in the kicking game and get a role in the kicking game for himself to make himself more valuable with a roster spot in order to make the team. Guy like a Jeff Thomas or a Sean Riley, those guys, they have return ability. They have return experience, both on punts and kickoffs. That adds a lot to their kind of repertoire. That's how Gunnar Olszewski, quite frankly, made the team last year, was as a punt returner. So if you don't play on fourth down and you're a UDFA trying to make the Patriots roster, no matter what position you play, you better start learning how to play on fourth down, because that's the only way that you're going to make the football team.
Let's talk about Mohamed Sanu, because he has posted some Instagram stories where he looks like he's in great shape. We know he dealt with that high ankle sprain most of last season that really hindered his ability to contribute. But Leon wants to know if you think he'll have a great season this year.
Well, I think there was a bunch of disappointment with Mohamed Sanu last year internally, both the team and Mohamed Sanu himself. That injury, that high ankle sprain that he suffered against the Eagles, really derailed all the momentum in the world that they had from the prior two games, especially that game in Baltimore, where he was a really reliable target for Tom Brady in the underneath part of the field, out of the slot mostly. And I think the biggest thing for Sanu is that was extremely hard and disappointing for him, that he came to a new team. There was a ton of kind of excitement and momentum brewing for him, especially after that Baltimore game, and to have it all come crashing down and then have to play on the high ankle sprain and play at 50% and not look like himself. That's obviously disappointing too, because sometimes, no offense to fans, but sometimes I don't think fans consider that enough. When they watch a player, they just say, oh, Mohamed Sanu just sucks, when actually he was just really injured. And that's a really difficult injury to play through. So I think Sanu has all the potential in the world to have a much better year two in the system than year one, especially if he can stay healthy.
Switching gears just a little bit, Tasha mentioned Shane Vereen on WEEI said he asked a bunch of players and has not gotten the same answer twice on the Malcolm Butler benching in the Super Bowl. What are your thoughts, and will we ever know what really happened?
I have not gotten the same answer twice either, Tosh, so I don't want to start throwing things out there that I've heard, because all of it is unconfirmed rumors at this point. All I can say about it is, from what I can gather from talking to people, is that it's probably a bit of everything that you've heard. It's a lot of little things, I think, that ultimately added up to the benching. I don't think it was one smoking gun that we're missing that was the big reason why, but I think that there was a kind of a series of events, a domino effect, if you will, where everything just kind of hit the fan at once, and it led to Malcolm Butler, sitting out the Super Bowl. And obviously it will be one game that, to me, was maybe the beginning of the end of Tom Brady in New England. Maybe it predated that a little bit with the Alex Guerrero stuff, but they kind of ironed that out a little bit and figured out that type of stuff with Guerrero. And then in 2017, losing a Super Bowl where Brady plays so well, if they hadn't come back and won it in 2018, then I think that he might have seriously walked away from the team sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's always going to be something that Patriots fans will look back on and wonder. I don't think the real story will ever really surface, because who even knows the real story? We don't know if anyone does, other than Bill Belichick.
Bill Belichick and Malcolm Butler. Malcolm Butler knows. He said it in interviews and stuff like that. Like, he knows what he did wrong. He knows why he ended up in the doghouse. But unfortunately, it's just 10 different reasons you get for it. And I think that all of them have some truth to them.
We're just going to get to a few more questions here. If we don't get to yours, we'll be back next Tuesday. We have 2 questions here about the wide receivers group, so I'm going to combine them. Midway through the season, what does the wide receiver position look like? Are there any surprise cuts or trades in your estimation?
I don't think there will be any big surprise cuts or trades. Unfortunately, the Patriots are so up against it cap-wise that going out there and making a splash for Stephon Diggs or DeAndre Hopkins this offseason was just kind of unrealistic, and I don't really see that changing anytime soon. So, I mean, yeah, maybe you could make the case that a surprise cut could be a Sanu. He could end up getting moved or cut. I don't think he'll be straight out released. Maybe they could get, something back in compensation for him in a trade. Maybe that's the move that they end up making if a guy like a N'Keal Harry and Jacoby Myers really start to shine in training camp and they feel like they want to give those snaps to a younger guy. Maybe that's the direction that they go in, especially a guy like Myers, I think, could take a lot of the snaps and kind kind of run a lot of the same routes as a guy like Sanu. But I wouldn't say there are too many surprise cuts or changes. I would think that midway through the season, the way it looks now, we'll probably be looking at a top three. That's Julian Edelman, N'Keal Harry, and Mohamed Sanu. And then you have Damari Bird and Jacoby Myers kind of sprinkling in there at different times, different packages, different situations where they're going to be useful.
Last question here about Jason and Devin McCourty, because the Twins have been in the news recently for all of their work against racial injustice, and they're really strong leaders off the field. But the question is whether or not they'll also be highlighted on the field and make a really big impact on the defense this upcoming season.
I can't say enough good things about Jason and Devin McCourty. I think that Patriots fans should really take what we have with Devin McCourty right now and really appreciate the type of leader and the type of person that is running, is a team captain and is basically the leader now of the team now that Tom Brady has moved on. It's really amazing to see it even from the outside looking in of just how impactful he has been, basically leading these discussions with the players over video call. Bill Belichick has kind of taken a back seat and said, I'm going to give the floor to Devin and Matthew Slater and Jason McCourty and all these leaders and veterans that we have in the locker room. And Devin McCourty in particular has really taken that by the horns, and I commend him for it. In terms of how he's going to play on defense, I mean, he's a stud. He's always going to be good on defense. My question really is he going to play predominantly in the deep middle as a free safety, or are they going to continue to move him around and do other things? Now that Deron Harmon is gone, maybe he does lock in more to that free safety role predominantly, and he gets to play a little bit more ball hawking and go for interceptions and things like that. But either way, he's going to be great. Jason, I think, is more just that stable, steady veteran that can play inside. He can play outside. He can play man. He can play zone. And you kind of have some comfortability with him that he's just going to get his job done. He's going to do his job. He's going to get his assignment and all that kind of stuff. So I really think that it's both of them. It's a great having both of them on the team. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And for all of our Patriots coverage, you can find it on our website at clnsmedia.com and on our YouTube channel right here at Patriots Press Pass, where we churn out content pretty much every day of the week. If we didn't get to your question this time, don't worry. We'll be back next week on both Tuesday and Friday at 1 p.m. Same time, same place. We'll get to it then. Thanks for tuning in once again.
Thanks, guys.